We're having a great conversation tonight with Dr. Katie Foss from MTSU, a journalism professor and a strategic media professor, and is with you as well. We thank you for your calls tonight. We still have about 10 minutes, so if you want to chime in, give us a call, 615-737-PLUS. Jeff just called in and he was talking, you know, kind of in the sense where we've all been throwing your hands up saying, I just don't know where to find the truth. I'm just done with social media. You brought up a great point. Social media and social media channels are here to stay. It is a way of life, so we have to figure out how to navigate it. Us, older generation,
yes,
and particularly our kids, because they are on it. This is how they communicate. I'll just let you take it from there.
Sure. So we can't just dismiss this as something that's again going to go away. That it just doesn't work. It's what they love consuming, and the platforms are constantly changing. They're evolving. They're switching what's their favorite platform to ones that we've never even heard. As a media studies professor, I've never heard of some of the ones they're using. So it's really, really important that we are teaching kids how to be digitally literate. That in schools, it's part of curriculum. How do you identify accurate information? Where do you go? What sources do you trust? Not to give your information out online. To look out for cyberbullies. To look out on people who might be predatory, and understand how to evaluate on their own so that they have the confidence and the skills to do it. Because just because you go online doesn't mean you know how to use it, and it's only going to intensify as a part of our lives that influences everything that we do.
Oh, from our callers, from Jeff and Johnny, I felt like this this just desire to know how to do it better, whether you be 40 or 60 or 80, because it is a part of our lives. Does it start with what something we do a lot of times in the newsroom, verifying that source?
Yes, and looking across outlets. So I can't stress that enough, that if you feel like there's a particular outlet that you don't trust because you question the legitimacy of the information or you don't agree with the perspective, then make sure you're consuming a lot of different outlets. Look for those patterns. Look for what the outliers are. If there's one outlier in a sea of mainstream news outlets and the story doesn't fit the other ones, then I would question that particular story. Again, social media, I cannot say it enough, is not a source in itself. That's not where you get your news, even if it's how you get your news. It's not the same as really looking where does the content come from, who's producing the content, why are they producing, what have they done in the past, who's writing the story, what's that person's credentials, how are we evaluating the gatekeeping process, which is the biggest difference between regular users creating content on YouTube or writing blogs, because a blog is not a news source. And again, outlets that follow a gatekeeping process to make sure that the facts are actually facts and not just something somebody created to fit with whatever agenda they might have.
Because really, anybody these days can have a social media channel, whether it's a YouTube channel
and
or
make it look
blog,
professional.
make it look very professional. Anybody can put a camera up in front of them and start talking and opining, and away they go. And share, right?
Yes, and get a lot of followers. And oftentimes, if we're looking for followers, it is the sources that aren't really credible sources that are getting a lot of followers and a lot of traction. And just because your friend shares something doesn't mean that it's necessarily factual information, that you don't know the amount of work that your friend did. So it just, I would say trust the primary sources yourself and look for it yourself, rather than just saying somebody from church said this and therefore I should believe it.
Yeah. Let's go back to the phone lines. We have Matt on the line. Hi, Matt. Good evening to you.
Oh, good evening.
Hi there. Go ahead.
I just picked up on the show just a couple of minutes ago. This might have already been asked, but what does the guest think about the situation in 2020 when the story broke about the Hunter Biden laptop and all the social media platforms and stations, a lot of them, completely discounted and wouldn't even allow it to be posted. I mean, the Washington Post, I think the oldest newspaper in the country, was taken off Twitter for it, and now we've got the New York Times saying, "Oh yeah, this was true."
All right, let's
Sorry.
That's okay.
A little late.
No, that's okay. Thank you for calling in. Go ahead.
So good question, and I will say, first of all, not the oldest newspaper in the country, because we would go to public occurrences in 1690, but I just wanted to clarify that. Actually, because I follow my own and heed my own advice, without doing my own research right now and looking at the coverage specific to that moment in the Washington Post or in a number of different outlets, I'm not going to weigh in exactly when those stories were removed from Twitter, because off the top of my head, I don't know. So what I will say is that, again, there's a gatekeeping process for a reason in media outlets, and you need to make sure that you're looking across outlets to really get the whole story.
Yeah, that could be a case study in a book in itself. I'm
Absolutely.
sure it will be. Quite the story there. Okay, Matt, thank you for calling in. Sorry we couldn't address it directly. Yes. Anything else, as you are now writing this book and looking at our pandemic experience through 20 and 21, we talked a little bit about glimmers that you've already gotten about how this initially spread, who was interested. What are you going to be looking at as you continue to write and research?
Just the number of different voices that have really come across because of our technology now that wouldn't have been covered in the past. That various marginalized communities, for example, that have access to social media platforms so that we get that pandemic experience covered in a different way than kind of the mainstream experience, and not to just completely other different communities. But I really do want to capture diverse voices and experiences in different through different topics. So like school closings, for example, and the economic impact on families, especially families who are, who had no choice but to be essential workers. I'm also really interested, as we talked about a little bit, about vaccination rates and communities in which we had to change up the strategy in order to get even access to different things. So, I do want to look at this and write this book in a way that if you read it 20 years from now, you still understand what happens. I can't write it too much in the moment, or too much of it will have passed, and we won't have the context to explain, or even try, I should say, try to explain the last 2 years. That if we want something that's going to be, in some ways, a record of what's going on through just me, and then people should read other stories, of course, on COVID, then it's got to be something that can last beyond our moment.
As you were writing the first book, did anything, it was published before we really were in the heart of this pandemic. Anything you went back and went, oh, this goes right along with it, with the COVID, or oh, this is shockingly different? Anything that really struck you?
So many things, different experience, especially reading some diaries and stuff. Of some of them, what's missing from a lot of the media coverage was the mundane kind of parts of life, because people didn't write about it as much because it was mostly news coverage. However, in diaries, you do get some of that
flavor,
kind of where you're just kind of waiting. That waiting that we had for so long of something's going to happen. We know there's a crisis, something's going to happen, but it's not happening, at least not what I'm experiencing, thank goodness. And that's what's missing from a lot of the narratives of the past, just because people didn't have an outlet to create or to write their experiences other than the few diaries that have been preserved. That is just so different that, again, when everybody's access, and also we've stretched out this moment so much longer than ever before. And
my voice can go around the world via Twitter or whatever, and it's documented. It's easy to see now, whereas in the past it probably wasn't. Well, so very interesting. Tell folks where they can find your book.
Sure. So you can find my book either through the University of Massachusetts Press website, or certainly through Amazon, and all my books, in fact, are on Amazon as well, and other outlets.
And it's called?
Constructing the Outbreak, Epidemics in Media and Collective Memory.
Fantastic. It's been a great chat this past hour.
Thank you so
for
much.
Spending time with me. I appreciate it. It's a very interesting conversation. When we come back, I will tell you what's on tap for the rest of the week, so stay with us.